So we'll just wait hi.
Hello.
Hi, Jessica. Welcome to this Instagram Live. So happy to have you here.
Yeah, so happy to be here.
Wonderful. So, everyone, this is Jessica, and Jessica is someone I met, immediately when I came back from traveling and just came back to San Diego. She's one of the friends who reached out. We had a nice meeting. I'm really interested in Jessica's work here in San Diego. And Jessica is a psychedelic guide and integration coach. And if you caught my live last week, I also was interviewing Payam, who is a psychedelic facilitator and kind of a modern shaman. And I'm happy to have your beautiful feminine force on today. And I like that you're doing more local work here in Southern California. So Jessica, let me hand it over to you, and why don't you tell our listeners and people watching this live what it is that you do in this world.
Yeah, so I'm technically a doctor of physical therapy. I started out in that profession and I worked primarily as a pelvic floor physical therapist. And what I really loved about that area of PT is that I was working with a lot of people with chronic pain and history of trauma. And so my draw to that area was really focused on providing like the emotional support and the space for people to access their own healing. And the physical therapy was kind of just like the conduit to do so.
Right.
But eventually I sort of was really feeling like that wasn't the answer. You know, physical therapy is a great tool for a lot of things, but when people have chronic pain and history of traumas contributing to their chronic illnesses, it just really isn't the answer. Because you have to really heal the source of it. And even though physical therapy is a very nice way of healing symptoms, it really is just healing symptoms for those things. Obviously, acute injuries are different. But those long-standing problems, I just personally don't believe are truly rooted in the physical body. And so I really felt like I was going to turn to more energy healing work eventually. And it just so happens that when I moved to San Diego, my soul was kind of like, it's time a lot sooner than you think it's time, but welcome to the party. And so I've been, working with psychedelics personally for a long time. And I did therapy for my own traumas and my own illnesses for a while, just like normal talk therapy. And it was really helpful. But what I found is that when I started using psychedelics, it just really took me to the next level and allowed me to have access to things, to heal things in a way that normal talk therapy just couldn't access because my brain was so powerful at hiding it. Helped other people access the psychedelic work casually over time. And this year really just turned into me doing it full time. And so, yeah, so when I say psychedelics, I'm really using it to talk about various ways of accessing certain parts of the brain. And so, I think that certain types of breath work are considered psychedelic healing. You can use cannabis to access psychedelic healing. And then there's a whole host of different plant medicines like psilocybin or ayahuasca or San Pedro, like all of these other things that can access that. And, I know that people hear the term psychedelic and usually just think of like, if they're not familiar with this world, they think of the traditional like psychedelic drugs, but I'm really intentional about talking about these things as medicine because I believe that that's what they are. And that's what my experience with them has been. The problem is just that culturally, we haven't been taught how to use them in that way. And so that's sort of the limiting factor. We have to have a paradigm shift now.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, so much of what you just said like rings so true. When I went into medicine, when I was studying natural medicine and seeing patients, I found the same thing. I found that every physical complaint was rooted in some sort of emotional trauma or something that happened in the past that person is still holding on to. So I recognize in you that desire to go deeper with people,
Yeah.
and And the people who are willing to go deep, I honor that kind of bravery. You know, it's not easy diving into your trauma and your shadow and your past at all.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like sometimes I've always sort of felt like a bridge, which I felt like when I was in physical therapy too. I was kind of bridging the gap between traditional Western medicine and like giving people access to mindfulness and like healthy eating behaviors and things like that. And now that I'm in this world, I still very much feel like the bridge. I just feel like that's kind of my role here. So I do work with some people who have had psychedelic experiences in the past. And that's a huge part of like the integration coaching that I do. But a lot of the people that I work with have never had access to this. And so it's cool to kind of like open this doorway for them. But something that's really common that people say is like, oh, I'm afraid of like what my mind's gonna come up with when it's in that state. And it's so funny to me because I mean, obviously that's a statement that's made just because they don't understand what's going to happen yet, but also like it's already in your brain anyway. And I think that that's a huge factor. Like this shadow stuff is already being held in you. And if you're not thinking about it consciously, that's when it starts to present as, traumas or like, for me, it was like disordered eating behaviors. For other people, it's chronic illnesses. And like, people can even go so far as to say that it turns into cancer eventually, And so, yeah, we don't like to think about our shadow stuff consciously, but when you don't do that, it's already being stored somewhere. And so I just really feel like this medicine gives us access to bring that into the conscious state so that then it can be released. And now your body and your energy aren't holding that stuff and you don't have to worry so much about it turning into these chronic things.
That is sweet freedom, You and I have both experienced plant medicine ceremonies, and I did a lot of this work when I was training in hypnotherapy. I think any type of practice where you can drop into subconscious, where you can like touch those things that have been stored away, that have been relinquished, that just been given to the shadow, put in the closet. We bury those things, I think, for our own survival, right?
Yeah.
But any type of medicine or practice that can bring those things up into the light is going to be so beneficial. And it's funny, when I work with people with hypnotherapy, they say the same thing. They say, I'm afraid of what might come up. I think that's the number one fear of people.
Yeah.
Is their own fear of what's going to surface, even memories that have been forgotten, right? Which happens in the case of like sexual trauma a lot of the times. I'm just curious, what are some of the other ways that you have found the true and the deep healing to occur? I know we touched on, plant medicine. I brought up hypnotherapy. What are some other ways that you encourage people to dive in to that deep healing?
I think breath work is essential. The breath is where I started all of my PT patients, just with like normal diaphragmatic breathing, but there's so many breath practices, that like connecting to the breath is really the answer, if you are having a thought loop or if you're having anxiety about something or fear about something, if you can connect your breath and calm your system, you can like logically problem solve those things, and what's cool about certain types of breath work is that they, so like holotropic breath work or even the Wim Hof method, both create symptoms in your body that are similar to what people experience during like panic attacks. So it'll be like tingling or like this heavy breathing or, sometimes people even go into this state of like hazy consciousness. And if you're unfamiliar with breath work, it sounds like, oh, is that safe? but what breath work does is it puts you in those states intentionally so that when you feel those symptoms by accident, they're not that overwhelming. So breath work and meditation, I think, are like non-negotiables. I think everyone should be doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing, this is funny, but I tell my clients that they should have like a daily scream and a weekly cry, which is like kind of like a lot. Like you don't necessarily have to do it every single day, and like you don't always need to cry every single day, but both of those emotions are so healing to release. And what's cool about like crying, a lot of times it's hard to elicit. Like you need something to trigger it for most people, but screaming, like you can just scream. And you know, not everyone has a place that they can just scream, but like screaming into a pillow is fine. But if you can scream into open air, like that releases energy that you just don't have to be holding. And maybe it'll bring up like access to things that you're angry about, but sometimes I don't know where the scream's coming from, and it still feels good, you know? It's just like a release of this excess energy that maybe even isn't mine. Maybe I've picked it up from other people like complaining to me about stuff, you know? But if you can decrease like that hold on that energy just with like a daily scream practice, it's so powerful. And like when you start it, it feels awkward, but it's amazing.
Yeah. You know, and animals, when they're traumatized, they shake, right? They shake, they move, they move that energy. And I don't think we're taught as humans to move the energy, to bounce, to shake, to scream, to release it in some way. And I want to circle back around to the breath work. I once read that there is actually DMT in our lung tissue, which is activated when you do these breathing exercises. Have you found that to be true? Have you ever researched that? I'm so curious about that.
I have also read that, and I don't think that I've read it anywhere that I can be like, okay, this is proven in research, but I've read that in a bunch of places, and like it makes sense to me that that would be true because of the areas of the brain that are being accessed during those breath work. And there is research on the areas of the brain that are being accessed during breath work. So I don't know if it's truly DMT that's released that's creating those areas being accessed, or if the breath just lights up the areas of the brain similarly to what DMT was. But either way, it doesn't matter, because like the brain being facilitated in that way is what's going to give us access to like those thoughts. And I have a post, you know, in my psychedelic healing Instagram. One of them talks about the areas of the brain that are accessed. And one of the things that's really powerful is it decreases breathwork, and other psychedelics or plant medicines decreases the activation of like the default mode network. And that's the area of our brain that really is accessed when we daydream and when we think about the future and things like that. And those daydreaming sounds great, but if you daydream too much, it turns into like anxiety, you know, like if you're constantly worried about the future, if you're constantly reflecting on the past, that's where anxiety and depression come from. So when that default mode network is overactive, it's really common for like anxiety and depression and things like that to present. And these types of healing actually decrease the activity there while accessing other parts of the brain. And that's how people can get out of those loops. It like puts them on pause for long enough for you to have a different perspective and be like, oh, I don't have to be stuck in that thought loop. Like, cool. Why am I doing this to myself?
Right. Yes, that's so important. And I find this with myself, like I still get triggered. I still get flooded. Like, you know, that moment when you're just flooded and rational thinking goes out the window. And what are, you know, I like to bounce. I like to move my body. I like to put on like reggae really loudly and just do anything I can to just bring me back to a place of center. What else have you found in your practices, and what you recommend to your clients for when we are triggered, when we're activated, when we're flooded? Like what are some good things to just bring you back to zero, to center?
I think movement is huge. I grew up dancing, and there was just like kind of this phase of my life where I didn't much, and now I'm like, what was going on? Like, why? I think dance is so powerful. There's a really good, they have it in online format, but have you ever heard of The Class?
No.
Okay,
No.
so it's by Taryn Toomey. She's out of New York, and there is, it's called The Class. You can just look it up on Instagram or on the internet, but it's a virtual exercise class. And instead of the cues being focused on like, okay, hold your arms this way, hold your legs this way, like whatever, it's much more focused on the breath. And something that's really cool that they do in that class is they have you like jump up and down for like a whole song, or dance around, or whatever. So you're getting physical fitness, but it's not about, you are strengthening your body, but it's not about strengthening your body. It's about getting the energy out. And so that I mean, I think that that exercise program is incredible. It's definitely going to sweep the nation eventually. But
Yeah.
it's amazing. And like the fact that it's online now because of the pandemic, like obviously it'd be nice if we didn't have the pandemic, but it's cool
Mhm.
that, you know, they don't have classes in San Diego, but I can do it online that way.
Very
So
cool.
dance, movement, yoga and breath work are both really proven to change the makeup of the frontal lobe of your brain. And
Right.
so a lot of people think that you know, people who do yoga are just, they just do yoga because they're like that, they're yogis, but actually people who do yoga have that yogic presence about them because they do yoga. And so, you know, if you're, I always use like the road rage analogy. Like if you're driving on the road and someone cuts you off and you're really annoyed about them cutting you off, what yoga does is it allows you, it changes your brain in a way that that won't be your reflexive reaction. So,
Mhm.
you know, having strategies to use when you're triggered, like breath work or a movement practice or not being afraid to scream, are really beautiful, but also doing things preventatively that support your system in that way, like a consistent yoga practice or eating healthy, like eating foods that are grounding and nourishing and keep your vibration at this like higher place instead of
Mhm.
processed foods that are known and proven to like create inflammatory responses and lower your vibration. Like your system just doesn't, I'm not perfect. I eat foods that are unhealthy also. So it's not, there's not coming from like a preachy way, but it's just like, it's just factual. Like if we can all be doing things all the time that are elevating our system, we won't
Mhm.
be in that place where we need to control our triggers quite as much. And then
Yeah.
also having those in the moment practices like the breath and like movement and like screaming can be for when we are in those moments.
I love that answer. And I'm so happy that you kind of take a mind, body, spirit approach to it. I like that you bring in nutrition. I find that nutrition is so important and because food is foundational. And I love that
Yeah.
you're talking about the vibration, you know, keeping our
Mm-hmm.
vibe high, doing things that feed that. And we had a question about your guidance and using cannabis.
Yeah.
This is something new. A couple people were interested in how you're using cannabis to heal and to you know, just foster that sense of growth and evolution. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a
So
little bit more
there
about that?
yeah, so there is a center in oh man, I think it's in Denver, but it might be in somewhere in Colorado. But it's called the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness, and the sort of person who started it is Daniel McQueen, and he wrote this book called How to Use Cannabis as a Psychedelic. That may
Mm,
not be the exact word of the book, but it's basically that's what it's about: how to use cannabis as a psychedelic. And
mhm,
so I took a class from him because he did a talk in San Diego last year, and I went to it, and they hosted a conscious cannabis circle, and I was like, this kind of sounds like, it sounds like a lie. Like you can use cannabis as a psychedelic. Like I don't believe you.
yeah.
But I went to it and it was so powerful. And what's cool about using cannabis as a psychedelic, you know, there's a certain blend that you have to use and you create a certain environment in order to be able to access it. A lot of it has
Mhm,
to do with like the energy moving through the room and the music being played. But what's nice about it is, first of all, it's legal in most places now. And
mhm,
also, it's not truly a psychedelic. So you're blindfolded in the experience. But if you don't want to be in a psychedelic state anymore, you just take the blindfold off and now you're high and you're not like stuck in that psychedelic state like you
I
are
see.
with others.
Yeah.
And so it's very specific to the environment for sure. But I think it's a really beautiful medicine to use with people who do have a good relationship with cannabis. And not everyone does. And I think that that's something that's a challenge because my own
Mhm.
personal experience with cannabis is that it's complicated. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I'm in right relationship with it and sometimes I'm not. And,
Mhm.
you know, we were talking about like frequencies. And I think that the fact of the matter is there's sort of this scale of where medicines fall on the frequency plane, and obviously there are certain drugs that are like very low that are not beneficial in any way to people's systems unless they're like literally prescribed for something specific. But like ayahuasca is like a very high vibrational medicine. Cannabis to me, I feel pretty certain that it's like a little bit lower than that. And so while it
Hmm.
can lift some people, I do think that it lowers others. And so
Hmm.
that is a really good option for people who have a good relationship with it. But for people who have this like complicated space, I personally would sort of advise them to use other things that maybe speak to them a little bit more clearly.
Yeah.
But it is really powerful, and like there's lots of benefits that I had when I sat in circle. And like I said, one of the beautiful things is that it is legal in a lot of places. So eventually it will be legal everywhere, and like as we start having access to these plant medicines more widely, like I just really believe it's kind of how the world's going to change. So
Absolutely. I find that when I do use cannabis, it takes me out of the normal just waking reality. It allows me to see things from a different perspective.
mhm.
Whether that's positive or negative, like it allows me also to take responsibility for my part if it's in a disagreement or something like that. So I love that you're using cannabis to help people heal and to, again, bring another perspective. And we have someone who's asking, is cannabis legal in Ohio? You should
um
be able to answer that, right?
I don't think it is. um I think it might be being used medicinally in Ohio now, but it's not. There's not like dispensaries in Ohio.
Okay, so
So
it's
that's
not
still in
recreational.
process. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. I also, wow, so many good things to talk about. I would love to just kind of like open up the subject of healing trauma. That seems to be just such at the forefront of what we're facing as a human race.
Hmm.
Doing the shadow work, PTSD. And understanding trauma from like a different point of view, that it's not always what we think it is.
Hmm.
Can you speak to how your work helps with that kind of healing?
Yeah, for sure. So, first of all, I think that one of the most important books for people to read is The Body Keeps the Score. It's kind of a hard read, but um, it's really powerful in understanding how your brain and your body process trauma. The summary of it is basically that we store memories differently when we are in a state of fight or flight versus when we are in a state of peace, right? So like I'm storing this memory right now very explicitly. Like I can see the white that you're wearing and the white in the background, and like I know what I'm wearing, and I'm very calm and grounded while we're speaking. So I
Mhm.
will be able to recall details of this pretty specifically. But when someone is in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, um, that type of memory doesn't get stored. The memory that gets stored is the emotion that's being triggered and
Right.
the fear that's being triggered. And that's really the only piece of it. And what is interesting, you were talking about memories with hypnotherapy. Um, when people are in not only the moment of fight or flight, but also this phase of life where they have experienced a trauma, none of those other memories get stored well either. So, like, I have literally like probably 10 or 15 years of my life that I have so few memories of
Mhm.
because I was so stuck in this fight or flight phase. And
Yeah.
what's beautiful is that, my experiences with plant medicine is that as I heal a trauma, memories from that phase of life also come back.
Oh, wow.
And good ones. And so, like, even though people don't really want to dive into their ugly memories often, what's beautiful is that as you heal, those beautiful memories also come back. And I think that that is really something that needs to be stated more so that people aren't so fearful of accessing their traumas. But the work that I do with people specifically, like certain medicines work in certain ways and access trauma healing in certain ways. But when I'm working with people in medicine space or with coaching, I have them kind of go back into those memories and talk to the version of themselves that's stuck there. And so this is, if people have ever heard of, like inner child work, there's a version of therapy where they'll have you imagine this memory of when you were a child or when you were, maybe 2 years ago, whatever the memory is. and go back and talk to that version of yourself. But I found that when I'm doing that in sober space, I have to do it like 6,000 times for it to stick. And then also eventually I just get sick of doing it. like it just doesn't stick quite as well. But in the medicine space, when I have someone go through a memory and like talk to that version of themselves, it's like that version of themselves gets integrated so quickly that the repetition isn't even necessary. Like that we just are able to get back the version of themselves that was stolen in that trauma. And, you know, depending on the trauma, if it's like I was crying in my bed at age 5 and my parents were downstairs watching TV and they didn't hear me, like that's low on the trauma scale, even though it felt big to me, right? Versus if someone was like attacked in some way, those might have to be worked through deeper and deeper and deeper repetitively. So it's not like plant medicine or the psychedelic space is magic dust, but it is, it's the closest thing we have.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I just
totally.
think
And
it really helps, close those memory loops in a way that makes them more explicit and specific than this like dark haze over all of them.
yeah, nice. I like that. I like that. And, you know, I just want to remind everyone who's watching this, you know, we can't heal these things on our own. I just want to encourage people who know that they need healing, know that they have some things they need to work out and work on. We need each other. We need these plant medicines. We need the beautiful and sacred shamans and guides, and you know, the healers that are kind of diving into this work and offering this work. You know, I was reading up on trauma yesterday and just read this quote by Peter Levine, who I believe is all into somatic experiencing like where it is in the body. But he said, trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. And I think what he's saying is like in those moments of trauma, sometimes we don't have someone to talk to about it or to help us process like what actually happened there. And I truly believe like we can't go at this alone. Even these dark things that maybe we don't want to share with another human being. I just want to encourage everyone, like seek out that therapist or that healer or that guide who can help you move through these things that have become lodged in your body, really.
Yeah, I think that quote is so beautiful. And I think something that's different about the medicine space versus like the traditional therapy that I was doing is, you know, I love the talk therapist that I had for years, and I still talk to him every once in a while because I think it's important to maintain that relationship. But I always felt like nervous to tell him stuff, not because of him, because of like the shame that I was holding. And plant medicines and psychedelic space is really what allowed me to like see the beauty and vulnerability and release that shame that prevents us from asking for help. Like there's so much power in asking for help, and exactly what you're saying, we all need it. You know, like I guide people through this stuff, and the only reason I can do that is because I see someone else to guide me, you know. Like I can only elevate people as high as I've elevated myself, and there's so much power in us hearing each other's stories that just gets lost in the shame that's carried in our culture. Like depression and anxiety and trauma are really good at making you feel like you're the only one experiencing it, and people are going to hate you if they know that you're experiencing it. And that is like not true, you know. Like so much of my healing happens when I hear other people's stories, and I host these integration circles in Balboa Park twice a month, and the point of them is to have those stories witnessed. You know, not everyone has a most recent experience to talk about, but sometimes if you're sharing your experience, it'll trigger something in me that I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought about like this version of me in that way. Like now it's a seed for me to grow later, you know? And so witnessing each other's traumas and stories without the need to like put in our own 2 cents about them even is so powerful.
I love that. I love that. That's great. I want to run this by you. This is something that happened to me very recently. Like you, I have a past history of eating disorders, and I think that's how it manifests for many, many young women, kind of coming up into this world and a society that keeps us kind of repressed. But my boyfriend reached out the other night and he texted me, "What did you eat for dinner?" And I got triggered in that moment, and I had to remind him. I said, "Look, like, I have a history of this." I become activated, and he apologized and was very, very compassionate towards that. But then I started to think, am I going to always have to ask people to tiptoe around what could trigger me? Or is this something I need to dive into and heal? You know, the fact that it's still coming up means that there's still something to heal there.
Totally.
What are you?
It's so funny
I just caught myself.
because there's nothing that makes me like cringe more in the world than when I'm eating something. People are like, "What's that?" I'm like, "It's nothing. Leave me alone." Like, but I think what you're saying is absolutely true. Like, if this is true across the board for anything, I tell all my clients that are having problems, like in relationships and whatever, it is never the other person doing something to you. It is always the way you're receiving it. Always, no matter what. Like, even if that other person has so much that they need to heal and you can see it, if they are able to trigger you, there is something in you that needs healed. And I do think that what we were saying before, is true, that healing is not linear. Healing is cyclical, and you always come back to these things that have been problematic deeper and deeper. And I really believe that our traumas, wherever they are on that trauma scale, are our biggest triggers. But they're also our biggest teachers. And so there's like this beauty that when you start doing this work, you start to have a little bit of reverence for your traumas, because you can see how much they actually are there to elevate you once you start the healing process. But that being said, it's interesting that we're talking about this, because I was on an ayahuasca retreat this weekend, and a huge thing that I had was this shift in my eating disorder. I've spent years healing this, and compared to where I was when I was in high school, I was considering it healed, but it's interesting, like, the behaviors can be gone, but the thought loops really linger. And whenever it's almost like I kept my dreams and my plans for like business and stuff very small, because there was like this fear that if I do something that requires too much of me, I'm going to send myself into that space, and I just don't want to be in that space. But I had this experience this weekend where I literally saw like that version of me as this thing that was totally dissociated. And eventually in the medicine space, like, I was able to bring her back into my body. And it was crazy. Like, I don't even know how to explain it in a way that I'm feeling it, but I don't think I'd ever been in my body before, because that piece of me has always been like floating elsewhere. And like, I was walking down the steps and I was like, oh my gosh, is this what it feels like to walk on your legs? Like, what? but to me, that experience this weekend makes me feel like that actually is healed for me, which is something that I didn't really think that I was ever going to be able to completely heal. And it doesn't mean the thought loops are never going to come back, but it just feels very like shifted in such a big way that I didn't think was accessible. And I think that's really what plant medicine in the psychedelic space does, is it provides it opens a door to heal things that you maybe don't know that you need, but also you don't think are possible, but they are. Like, that's kind of what we're here to do, is to consistently be healing and growing in these ways that is infinite. So I would say yes, the fact that you're triggered by that probably means that maybe we should do a ceremony together.
I would love that. I would love that. Wow. And gosh, you bring up so many good points about just the different fragments that we lose of ourselves. And, I love the shamanic journeying and the soul retrieval. The act of integrating those parts of yourself that you left, where you dissociated when it got too difficult. you know, when the day I was born, I was this was in the late 1970s, and I was born jaundiced. I had yellow skin, and at that time, the standard medical practice was to take the baby away from the mom and put the baby in a box for like 3 days.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so my first experience right into this earthly plane was one of abandonment. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so those wounds were so deep, and I still work through them. But sometimes we don't know when the fragmentation, when we lost ourselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't know when that happened. We're not conscious of it. Like how would I have known unless I did some deep regression and went into the plant medicine state and healed those things? How would I know? So I'm saying that so I can just tell everyone out there who's listening, like it doesn't necessarily have to be a scary thing to access those memories, and for that consciousness, for the light of that awareness to just come to you, come into your own awareness. And that there are practitioners out there like you and I who hold a beautiful, safe, like warm, loving space for you to like work through these things. We all have to do this work. I think it's so imperative for every human being to do this type of work. And I know that's a lofty goal, but I truly believe it. I truly believe in this type of healing. And again, I just want to stress, like, there are people who can hold safe space for us to work through these things.
Yeah. And I think, I had this awareness this weekend. There's this saying in, the spiritual and the medicine space that healing has a ripple effect. So if I heal something, it allows other people around me to heal their stuff, and I think that a huge part of that is the trigger response. If we both are severely unhealed and you trigger me, I will immediately trigger you, and we just get stuck in this like horrible cycle. But if I'm able to stay grounded because I've done healing work, then we won't be in that cycle. And it almost is this opportunity for you to be like, oh, she didn't respond a way that I thought she would. Like, let me heal this thing now. But I also had this awareness that the people doing this type of work, it's not just on this plane that we're not healing people. We're also, that we're able to have that ripple effect. We're also not causing new traumas, because people kind of fight me on this sometimes, but I really don't believe that there are bad people in the world. I just believe that there are people who are in serious, serious, serious pain. And the more severe your pain, the more trauma you're causing. And, that gets so severe as to attacks on other people, unfortunately. And it's certainly, I'm not excusing that, but it's just like the best way for us to stop that stuff from happening is to heal ourselves so that there is this ripple effect everywhere. And, I think it is a big thing to say that everyone should do it, but I really believe it's going to happen. Like, it might, I would love it to happen tomorrow, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer. But I really believe that like the plants are going to heal the world. And it's this response to like the way we've been treating each other and the way we've been treating the world herself. And eventually we will get there.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, will you just tell us a little bit more about like how people can connect with you? What's the best way?
Yeah.
And again, like, tell us a little bit more about your offerings. You're in the San Diego area, but just tell us a little bit more about that.
So best way to connect with me is just to DM me on Instagram at Sacred Psychedelics. I respond to everyone, and usually what I like to do is do some sort of free consultation with everyone, whether it's virtually or in person, just to connect so I know why you're interested in this stuff and what you're dealing with, and also so I can be more specific about the offerings that I have that might be more relevant to you, because everyone is kind of being called to something different. But I do breathwork ceremonies, I do cannabis ceremonies, I do other plant medicines, and then primarily I work one-on-one. But if people have a group that they like want to intimately connect with, that's also an option. And then I do integration coaching. So if you've already had an experience and you're having a hard time integrating it, I can do one-on-one coaching sessions for that, or prep work. If you're going to go on a retreat, I can help like set intentions. And then I have that first and third Saturdays of the month in Balboa Park, we have integration meetings if you want to be in a group space. So something that I think is really important, like you were saying, we provide this space that's like safe and loving for people to do this work. And I have had people experience plant medicines. I wasn't there, so I don't know, but have experiences that they felt triggered by. And to me, that sounds like maybe someone was serving medicine or holding space that wasn't doing this work themselves. Because it's really important to have someone holding space for you that's doing the work themselves. Because like I was saying, I can only hold space for people as much as I've held space for myself. And so, you know, if I am the person that you feel connected to, I would love to hold space for you. But if something about me feels like it isn't safe, then maybe I can help you find someone that does feel that way, because it's so important to feel held in these spaces. And, you know, not every friend is right for every person. Not every boyfriend's right for every girlfriend, or vice versa, you know, and not every healer is right for every client. And it's nothing to be said about the client or the healer. It's just that relationship and that connection is absolutely essential. So if you're interested in this stuff, but aren't sure like who to work with, whether you're in San Diego or not, like still message me and maybe I can help you find someone. I work primarily in the San Diego area, but I also have clients that are out of state. So we can talk about that if that's you.
That's amazing. Awesome. So people can find you just through Instagram and DM you. Okay, good. And then our last question, and something I'm super excited about as we move forward. How do you see like the use of plant medicines and the healing centers that are going to kind of foster this type of healing? You know, the FDA is funding research studies looking at ketamine, looking at MDMA, looking at psilocybin, looking at so many different things for healing trauma and PTSD. We're kind of on the forefront of something new, and I love that. I'm a Sagittarius. I'm an explorer. I love the new. Where do you see this going? I mean, it's so exciting to me.
I think that what's beautiful about it being plant medicines is that they are natural, you know, like there's something that is going to be accessible to everyone because you will just be able to grow them and or access them or like go somewhere where they're naturally grown instead of them. I mean, it's some things are like MDMA and ketamine obviously like don't grow in the ground and are really helpful in their own ways, but the plant medicines specifically, just I think the fact that they are natural and can just be grown is something that is going to create that environment that we're talking about where everyone should be doing this stuff. I think that it's really amazing that science is starting to delve into the healing powers of this, because there are some people that are okay with seeing people like me, and there are some people that are like, I need to see a doctor. You know, and while I don't personally go through like traditional Western medicine fully in any way, like some people do. And I think that the fact that this avenue is going to be open to people who want to see their traditional doctor and only their traditional doctor is like really powerful. I think that something that makes me nervous is that the research environment is so strict in the way that things have to be done, because that's how you find that things are like reproducible.
Right.
And is that's not really how psychedelics work.
It's true.
Everyone's journey is so different, and there's really an art, you know, like I have a specific structure in the way that I work with people, but every single experience is so different, and being able to be soft and flowing in that space and respond in however the person needs it outside of like, well, this is how we have to do it, is like really essential for those spaces to be as healing as possible. And so that concerns me a little bit. But I do think that the fact that these are going to be accessible to everyone and like legal supersedes that right now.
Hmm.
And then if we get to that point, you know, we get there. But
Yeah.
I'm excited to see like how these doors open up, and honestly, like the way our world is going to change when more and more people start doing this, I can't even describe that. You know, it's going to be so powerful. So it's exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah, and I totally get what you say with you know, it being so standardized. It's too wild. It's nature. It can go so many different ways. And you know, I applied for a program where I would be trained as a facilitator, and I would take part in FDA approved studies using these different plant medicines. And you know, was not chosen because of my designation, because I'm a naturopathic doctor and
Yeah.
not a medical doctor, not a psychotherapist. And it just made me think like, wow, we've got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
We've got
Yeah.
a long way to go.
That's the kind of thing that makes me, it just like sits a little off in me, you know, because exactly what I was saying, like to really hold the space for this type of work, you have to be doing it. And um, if they're that strict about people that they're allowing into those programs, I don't trust that the people actually holding the research space have done this work themselves. And the medicine is so powerful, the people in the experiments will like still have powerful experiences, but you just can't hold space the same way if you're not if you don't have the relationship with the medicine itself. So
Yeah, and you also can't help someone through the integration phase. Like as
yeah,
you know, that integration afterwards is so important. It's so important. So
it's
I feel like
everything.
that's when people will be coming to people like me and you who have
Yeah,
experienced it, who can help them understand what the hell just happened. Like my
yeah,
whole world was like rocked. And you know, you're right. Someone who hasn't experienced the medicine won't be able to guide someone in that regard. So yeah, yeah. I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you on that.
maybe we'll
Just
find another program we can do it together.
I know, right? I know I had that like rebellious feeling after that rejection kind of stung where I was like, well, screw it. I'm going to do this on my own then. I'm going to
Yeah,
find my people like you, and we're going to do this on a whole different level.
totally.
Um, so good. Is there anything else that you would like to share, or any insight you have, or anything to leave our viewers with before we say goodbye and wrap this up?
I think my last thing is definitely like the medicine space calls to you. And I can't explain it. It's just something where like plant medicine will call to you. So if you have been hearing about plant medicine recently, or if this is the first time and you continue to
Mhm.
hear about it, like consider that you're calling and look into it, because it's not a mistake when this stuff walks into your life. It's very intentional by a design that is unexplainable, but
Mhm.
powerful and important. So listen.
I love that. I love that. It's so true. Seeds have been planted today.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yes.
Oh, well, great, Jessica. Thank you so much. And everyone, if you enjoyed this, you know, go ahead and give Jessica a follow. Send her a DM if you have any questions or you'd like to work with her. And Jessica, keep up the good work, girl. I'm
Yes,
so happy
thank you
we
so
met.
much.
I'm
I'll
so
talk
happy
to
to
you
know you.
soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.